While criminals and lawbreakers are often associated with death rows, what happens when officers of the law break the law? Join us as we highlight police officers who were sentenced to death row in the U.S. Len Davis, State, Louisiana. Date of execution unspecified. Len Davis is a former New Orleans police officer. He was convicted of depriving civil rights through murder by conspiring with an assassin to kill a resident. In 1994, Davis beat a young man in New Orleans, thinking he was a suspect in the shooting of a police officer. Kim Groves, a 32-year-old woman and mother of 3 children, saw the attack and filed a complaint with the New Orleans Police Department. Another officer warned Davis about the complaint, and he conspired with a local substance dealer, Paul Hardy, to kill Groves. Hardy shot and killed her on October 14, 1994, less than a day after she filed the complaint. Damon Causey, a third man, hid the murder weapon, a 9mm pistol. Davis was convicted in 1996 on 2 federal civil rights charges, for directing Hardy to murder Groves and for tampering with a witness. He was initially sentenced to death on April 26, 1996. However, the Fifth Circuit reversed his death sentence when his conviction for witness tampering was thrown out. A different jury later decided on the death penalty for Davis, and he was officially sentenced to death once more on October 27, 2005. However, in 2025, President Biden offered him clemency and reduced his sentence to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Davis is currently imprisoned at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. Antoinette Frank. State, Louisiana. Date of execution unspecified. Frank is a former officer of the New Orleans Police Department. On March 4, 1995, she committed a violent armed robbery at a restaurant. The robbery led to the murders of 2 members of the Vietnamese-American family who ran the establishment. It also led to the murder of NOPD officer Ronald A. Williams II. Frank was aided by her probable lover, substance dealer Rogers Lacaze. Antoinette Frank visited Kim An, a Vietnamese restaurant with Rogers Lacaze. Frank was working off-duty as a security guard. As the restaurant was being cleaned after hours, Chow Vu went into the kitchen to count the money and then entered the dining room to pay Ronald Austin Williams II. Williams was a fellow security guard working that night to earn extra money. Williams had joined the New Orleans Police Department in 1991. He was married with 2 children. When Chow went to pay Williams, she saw Frank approaching the restaurant. Frank and Lacaze had already visited the restaurant twice that night for leftover food. During their last visit, Chow let them out. After they left, she couldn't find the key to the front door. When Frank came back for the 3rd time, Chow sensed something was off. She quickly hid the money in the microwave and rushed to the kitchen. Frank entered through the front door using the key she had taken earlier. As she moved past her brother Chow and another employee, Williams followed, trying to understand what was going on. Then gunshots rang out. Lacaze, who had crept up behind Williams, shot him in the neck, leaving him instantly paralyzed. As Williams fell, Lacaze continued shooting him in the head and back. Frank turned and headed back toward the dining room. Chow grabbed her brother, Kwok, and looked for a place to hide. They squeezed into the back of a large walk-in cooler, along with another employee. They had no idea where their siblings, Ha and Quang Vu, were. Ha and Quang had been sweeping the dining room floor when Frank walked in. From their hiding spot in the cooler, Chow and Kwok could see part of the kitchen and the entrance to the restaurant. At first, Chow noticed Frank searching the kitchen for something. After he moved out of view, more gunshots were fired. Chow then saw Frank looking in the spot where the Vu family kept their money. When Quang, the 17-year-old, hesitated to say where the money was, Frank hit him with the gun. She retrieved the cash from the microwave and shot Ha, who was 21, 3 times. Then she shot Quang 6 times. Once Frank and Lacaze were gone, Chow tried to call 911 on her cell phone, but there was no signal inside the cooler. Kwok ran out the back door to a nearby friend's home to call 911 and report the murders. A grand jury in Orleans Parish indicted Frank and Lacaze on April 28, 1995. Their trials were held separately. Lacaze's trial was held first from July 17 to 21, 1995, before Judge Frank Marullo. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Frank's trial started on September 5, 1995, also before Judge Marullo. On September 12th, the jury took just 22 minutes to find Frank guilty on all charges. The next day, they took only 45 minutes to recommend the death penalty. Frank was officially sentenced to death on October 20, 1995. She is currently on death row at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women in St. Gabriel. David Stephen Middleton. State: Nevada. Date of execution unspecified. David Stephen Middleton is a former police officer, kidnapper, murderer, and suspected serial killer. He was convicted and sentenced to death for the murders of 2 women committed in 1994 and 1995. He is also the prime suspect in at least 1 additional murder in Colorado, as well as several assaults committed while serving in the Miami-Dade Police Department. On August 8, 1994, 42-year-old Thelma Amparo Davila was reported missing by her younger sister after she failed to return home from work. She was a Guatemalan porter working at the Circus Casino in Reno. This was concerning because she had never missed work since being hired in 1988. She also did not have a way of getting around since she couldn't drive. Her fate remained unknown until April of 1995, when her remains were discovered in Verdi. On February 6, 1995, 45-year-old Catherine Powell was reported missing by her colleagues after failing to show up at work for 2 days. She was a teacher at Sun Valley Elementary School in Reno. Officers were sent to search her home, and they found her truck untouched. However, she was nowhere to be found. Some of her belongings were also missing. When they questioned the neighbors, they learned that an old beat-up car often stopped by her house, but the neighbors couldn't provide more details. On February 11th, Powell's body was discovered in a trash bin at the Lake Grove condominiums. While investigating possible suspects in the Powell case, one detective noticed Middleton because she had installed a TV at her home. He also owned a truck that was similar to the one seen by neighbors. On February 23rd, officers searched his apartment and found a shotgun. Since Middleton was a convicted felon, he wasn't supposed to possess firearms. He was arrested and taken to the Washoe County Jail with a $3,500 bail. As they dug deeper into his criminal background, investigators discovered Middleton had prior convictions in Miami. His purchases of electronic equipment even matched those ordered by Powell. This evidence led them to charge Middleton with the murders of both Powell and Davila, bringing him up on 2 counts of capital murder. In September 1997, Middleton was found guilty on all counts. A few days later, he was officially sentenced to death for the murders of Davila and Powell. He was also given 4 life terms without parole for their kidnappings. A month later, Middleton was sentenced to an additional 32 years for credit card and firearms offenses related to the cases. As of February 2024, Middleton remains on Nevada's death row, awaiting execution. Anthony Sully. State, California. Date of execution unspecified. In 1982, Sully met Tina Livingston, who owned a local escort agency. One of the girls working for Tina, Gloria Frevel, couldn't repay a $500 debt and tried to run away. In early February of 1983, Tina and another worker, Kelly Angel Burns, found Gloria in San Francisco and brought her to Sully's warehouse in Burlingame. Sully offered to sleep with Fravel when they got to the warehouse, but she refused. He then beat the girl and took her to the back of the warehouse. He handcuffed her and hung her from the ceiling. For the next 2 days, he kept Fravel in the warehouse, where he tortured and assaulted her. Livingston and Burns were in another part of the hangar. In most of the torture sessions, Sully tied a hangman's knot and hung it around her neck. But one time, Sully lost control, and Fravel managed to free herself from the gag and started screaming. Livingston and Burns tried to replace the gag and silence her. However, Sully came in and strangled her with a rope. The three of them put her body in the car, hoping to abandon it somewhere. While on the trip, Fravel regained consciousness. Sully pulled the car over and struck Fravel multiple times on the head with an axe. She soon stopped breathing. The three of them then got rid of her body near State Route 35. Sully's other victims are 19-year-old Brenda Oakton, 24-year-old Michael Thomas, 20-year-old Phyllis Melendez, 22-year-old Barbara Searcy, and 24-year-old Catherine Barrett. Anthony Sully was arrested on August 25, 1983. On June 3, 1986, Sully was found guilty on all counts by jury verdict. He was sentenced to death 12 days later. Sully died of natural causes at a medical facility on September 8, 2023. Before his death, he was placed on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Manuel Manny Pardo, State, Florida. Date of execution, December 11, 2012. Manuel Manny Pardo was fired from his position at the Sweetwater Police Department following several incidents involving law enforcement. He then became involved in the substance trade and killed his first two known victims in January 1986. Their names were Mario Amador and Roberto Alonso. Later that month, Pardo killed Michael Milot, a Haitian anti-Duvalier activist whom he believed to be a police informant. Milot was a gunsmith who had previously supplied Pardo with silencers for his handguns. Pardo's partner from the Sweetwater Police, Rolando Garcia, lured Milot to a car that belonged to Pardo's wife. Pardo was already waiting in the back seat. Once Milot entered the car and sat in the front passenger seat, Pardo shot him in the head with a 9mm pistol. In February 1986, Pardo killed Luis Robledo and Ulpiano Ledo during a robbery at their home. 2 months later, Pardo claimed 4 more victims in 2 separate incidents. Farah Quintero and Sarah Musa were killed over a dispute about a pawned ring worth $50 and for refusing to buy Pardo a VCR with stolen credit cards. Ramon Alvaro and his girlfriend Daisy Ricard were killed because Alvaro had failed to show up to several substance deals. Pardo was caught in a New York City hospital after he was found with a gunshot wound to his foot. The bullet matched those found in his last victims. The injury occurred during the murder of Ricard when Pardo's Ruger pistol jammed. After shooting her once, he bludgeoned her to death with the handgun, causing the jammed round to discharge into his foot. When police searched Pardo's home, they found a collection of Nazi memorabilia. At trial, evidence was presented showing that Pardo was a Nazi sympathizer who admired Adolf Hitler and held racist and anti-Semitic views. Pardo maintained that his mission was to rid Florida of its substance culture by killing active substance dealers and buyers, admitting to at least 6 of the 9 murders. During his trial, Pardo testified on his own behalf. He claimed, "I am a soldier. I accomplished my mission, and I humbly ask you to give me the glory of ending my life and not send me to spend the rest of my days in state prison." Prosecuting attorney David Waxman described Pardo as a cold-blooded killer and argued that Pardo and Garcia were substance dealers, eliminating the competition. Garcia was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. However, in 2002, he won a new trial because he had no involvement in the murders. He later pleaded guilty to 4 counts of second-degree murder, received a 25-year sentence, and was released from prison on September 5, 2002. Pardo was executed on December 11, 2012, by lethal injection, Frank Joseph Coppola. State, Virginia. Date of execution, August 10, 1982. Frank Joseph Coppola was a police officer from Portsmouth, Virginia. He was executed for the murder of Muriel Hatchell in 1978. Hatchell was tied up with Venetian blind cords and then had her head slammed into the floor repeatedly until she died. Coppola and his accomplices stole $3,100 in cash and some rings from the scene. On September 26, 1978, Coppola was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death in Virginia's electric chair. Coppola, his wife, Joseph Miltier, and his girlfriend planned to rob Peyton M. Hatchell. Peyton was a wealthy used car dealer living in Newport News. Coppola's wife was Karen, and Miltier's girlfriend was Donna Mills. In the spring of 1978, Coppola, pretending to be a priest, tried to get into Hatchell's house but failed. A few weeks later, the group devised a new plan. On April 22, 1978, Millis knocked on Hatchell's door, pretending to be a delivery girl. Muriel Hatchell, Peyton's wife, answered the door. She didn't know Mills had a gun hidden in a bunch of roses. Mills, Coppola, and Miltier entered the house, while Karen waited outside in a vehicle. As soon as they got inside, the trio attacked Muriel. According to trial testimony, Coppola slammed Muriel's head against the floor repeatedly, demanding to know where she kept her money. During the home invasion, Peyton Hatchell came home and saw his wife being attacked. The group then turned on him. Muriel died from a brain hemorrhage and complications from vomiting that blocked her airway. Peyton survived but was hospitalized for 3 weeks. He had to get a permanent steel plate in his forehead due to a skull fracture. All 4 perpetrators were caught and found guilty of the crime. In September 1978, Coppola was tried and convicted of capital murder. For their roles in the crime, Miltier was sentenced to 3 life terms. Mills received life plus 117 years, and Karen Coppola was sentenced to 55 years as an accessory. On August 10, 1982, Coppola was executed in the electric chair at the Virginia State Penitentiary. Charles Becker, State, New York. Date of execution: July 30, 1915. Charles Becker was a lieutenant in the New York City Police Department between the 1890s and the 1910s. He was convicted of first-degree murder and executed for the killing of Herman Rosenthal in 1912. Becker allegedly used his position to extort large sums of money from Manhattan brothels and illegal gambling casinos. These substantial sums were later shown to total over $100,000. In exchange, Becker offered immunity from police interference. He regularly gave a percentage of the money to politicians and police officers. The guy who controlled the area was Tammany Hall's leader, Timothy Big Tim Sullivan. Herman Rosenthal was an outspoken Estonian immigrant who ran several illegal casinos in the Tenderloin district. On one occasion, Becker raided one of his casinos, leaving a wreck behind. Rosenthal was upset. He complained to the press that Becker took 20% of the profits there. In July 1912, the New York World reported that Becker was one of 3 senior police officials involved in extorting money from Rosenthal's casinos. The day Rosenthal was scheduled to testify to a grand jury, he was murdered at 2 a.m. as he left the Hotel Metropole on West 43rd Street near Times Square. Louis Lefty Louis Rosenberg, Jacob Whitey Lewis Seidenschner, Frank Dago Frank Sirafici, and Harry Gyp the Blood. Horowitz were witnessed shooting him from their car, making no effort at disguise. They were separately tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. Manhattan District Attorney at the time, Charles S. Whitman, claimed that the 4 gangsters had murdered Rosenthal at Becker's command. After the murder, there was a huge public outcry. Becker was transferred to the Bronx and assigned to desk duty. Meanwhile, Whitman's office continued to investigate him. On July 29, 1912, Becker was arrested by special detectives from the district attorney's office. He was tried and convicted of first-degree murder in a trial overseen by Judge John Goff. However, the verdict was overturned on appeal. The case was retried in 1914, and once again, Becker was convicted and sentenced to death. He became the first police officer in New York to receive that penalty. The day before his execution, he told the warden, "Sure, I told them to put Rosenthal out of the way, but I didn't mean they should kill him. I wanted them to get him out of town so he wouldn't blab. Killing him was Rose's idea and the others. They wanted to save their own skins." On July 30th, 1915, Becker was put to death in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison. William Ennis, State, New York, date of execution, December 14th, 1903. William H. Ennis was a police officer from the Adams Street Station in Brooklyn. On January 1st, 1902, he broke into the home of his mother-in-law, Mrs. Alice Gorman, in Canarsie. He shot and seriously wounded her, then shot and killed his wife, who was living there. Reports say he committed the act in a fit of rage caused by heavy drinking and anger over family problems. After the shooting, Ennis ran along the railroad tracks for 2 miles to East New York. Police found him several hours later in a hotel room there. Before the killings, Ennis had been taken to court by his wife on a charge of non-support. The court ordered him to pay her money each week, but Ennis angrily said he would rather rot in jail than pay. He wanted his wife to leave her mother's home and come back to live with him. Ennis was eventually arrested and charged with the murders. At his trial, he attempted to claim insanity, but the court rejected his defense as insincere. On December 14, 1903, Ennis was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison. If you enjoy the way we create videos and would like us to bring more cases like this to light, please hit the like button and subscribe for more in-depth dives.